Hello and welcome to the Patient Educators Update. I'm Chuck Jones with Synergy Broadcast, and I'm pleased to welcome our guest today, Fran London. Hi, Fran.
Hi, Chuck.
Fran is the Patient Education Specialist for Phoenix Children's Hospital in Phoenix, Arizona, and she's also the author of the book No Time to Teach, which we use as a source of many of our shows. Fran, today we're going to talk about using materials in patient education, and specifically we're going to talk about the use or how to teach with booklets, pamphlets, and tear sheets. And I guess that would just encompass handouts in general. And so I'm going to turn it over to you and get you to explain what these are and how to use them, and specifically on tear sheets, because that's not a term that I'm familiar with.
Sure. Well, you know what a pamphlet is, a booklet. A handout is often just a piece of paper. Tear sheets often come in pads, so they're handouts that you get a pad of 100 of them and you just tear them off as you need them.
Okay. Now, are tear sheets normally sent by either publishers or drug manufacturers, or are those also made can be made internal and just the printer just pads them up for you?
I haven't seen them internally, but I'm sure it's possible. But usually they're published, purchased, and drug companies could also provide them.
Okay. I got you. Okay. Well, talk to us a little bit about how they should be used, when they should be used, do's and don'ts, tips and tricks.
Well, I have my own bias here, which is that if you don't feel the need to discuss what the contents are of a handout or a pamphlet or a booklet or whatever, then maybe you shouldn't even give it at all, because if it's not that important, why waste the trees? But if there is something important in the content that you're handing to people, and generally these are best used as reference materials for the learner to use at home. So if you give instructions about what to do and what not to do, it's nice to have them in writing to refer to later, or steps of a procedure that you do at home in writing. Yeah. So basically, I think they should be used for reference, and then when you're teaching, to actually refer to them while you're teaching, so that the learner can either underline or highlight or take notes while going through the contents.
Yeah, I would think from an education standpoint, handouts that include pictures or diagrams perhaps may be more descriptive than just text.
Exactly. Yeah, because this is something, again, they could refer to and help to identify where pieces are.
Yeah. Do you recommend that the nurse draw or put arrows or highlight different areas?
Interaction is always better. So yes, because then it will be more meaningful to the learner. Even putting the name of the person, the patient, on the piece of paper makes it more personal and makes it more likely that they will connect with the contents.
Okay. Does it make sense to if the patient can write and kind of sit up in bed, does it make sense to give it to them and maybe have them mark it up, or does that not work very well?
Either way works.
Okay.
People learn through the process of actually writing, so that helps them remember what the notes are. But if you're making arrows and pointing to pictures, you could write on it too, and it would still be meaningful for them.
Okay. Is it appropriate while you're working with handouts to be observant and assessing and using teach back during this process?
Absolutely. Yeah, there are lots of ways to go about initiating the use of paper materials. I mean, one is to ask, if you're really busy, hand it to them, ask them to read it first, and then come back and talk about the key points. Or when you hand it to them, say, I want you to especially pay attention to this part, and we'll talk about this. And then when you go back, do an assessment, evaluate understanding, ask them to tell you what they got out of it, what the key points are, how they're going to change their behaviors when they get home based on what it says. So yeah, it's a tool for teaching. It doesn't do the teaching.
Yeah, and I would also point out that some of the tips that you just got through talking about are similar to the way that you use video, in terms of, you know, having them do it while you're not there and being prepared to discuss when you come back, because that it helps kind of empower them, put them in the driver's seat to learn, and then when you come back, the question you don't ask is, did you understand? You know,
Right.
you kind of dig down in there. So that makes a lot of sense. So the takeaway that I have on this is that the process of teaching with a handout, whether it be printed in black and white or color pictures or whatever, the process is basically the same. You need to use it if it's going to add value to the process. You need to be cognizant of the patient's reaction and whether or not they're absorbing. You need to be assessing and asking questions other than did you understand, and using teachback in terms of basically what I'm saying is the process is similar regardless of the device that you have to support the teaching. Is that correct?
Exactly, because it's all evidence-based. And as you were talking, I just thought of one more thing that was
Sure.
very important before we start is make sure the patient can read before you hand them something to read.
Yeah,
Um,
that's, yeah. Yeah, I can see where that would be something you would just naturally assume, and it's not a good assumption. Yeah. Now, what about, we didn't talk about this before we started recording, but foreign language issues.
Yeah, that's very important because what I see often is we have printed materials in, for example, Spanish in Arizona, and it's easier to just hand it to the patient than to have that conversation with an interpreter.
Mhm.
And it's still very important to get an interpreter because, again, you don't know if they can read, if they understand it, if the medical material makes sense to them, if they can apply it in real life. You still have to have that interactive conversation to evaluate understanding and to give them an opportunity to ask questions.
Yeah, because the natural reaction, I think, is always going to be, do you have any questions? No.
Right,
You
right.
know, and so you've got to ask the questions or go specific to get them to kind of pull them out of their shell, so to speak, so they're not embarrassed about speaking up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as
Okay.
you pointed out, observe and
Yeah.
notice if there's any sign of misunderstanding or confusion.
Yeah, which, you know, nowadays you can pretty much look at people and tell they don't understand something. So it's all you have to do is just pay attention, and you can really get that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. Well, that's all about teaching with booklets, pamphlets, and tear sheets. And for those following along in your book, that's on page 91 of your book, No Time to Teach, which folks can find at their perhaps local bookstore, but it's certainly available from Amazon, and it's available online as an ebook for Kindle and other readers. And for those out there who are teaching staff and want to use it as a primer for any of their discussions in group type stuff, you can get a discount on Fran's book from the publisher Pritchett and Hull, and that's p-h.com, and they'll work that out for you. Fran, why don't you tell folks how they can get a hold of you?
I have a blog, a website at www.notimetoteach.com, and I'm on Twitter at notimetoteach.
Okay, cool. Well, I appreciate the feedback on how to teach with pamphlets and handouts, and let folks know that we're going to have a future episode that's going to talk about how to teach when you don't have anything in your hand. And so that'll be coming up soon. So thanks very much for your time, and we'll talk to you later.
Okay, thanks, Chuck.
You bet.